The Nikkor Z 24 to 120mm f4S is a full-frame, wide-range zoom announced in October of 2021 for a suggested retail price of $1,099.95 and was actually available as a kit lens on some Nikon mirrorless bodies. It has 9 rounded diaphragm blades with a constant f4 aperture at the widest and f22 stopped all the way down. Its uniquely complex optical construction consists of 17 elements and 13 groups, including 3 ED, 1 aspherical ED, and 3 aspherical elements with nanocrystal and ARNEO-coat and a fluorine-coated front element. I haven't seen this aspherical ED on any other lenses. It is internally focusing but externally zooming with a minimum focus distance of 0.35 meters or 1.15 feet, weighs 630 grams or 1 pound 6.3 ounces, with dimensions of 84 by 118 millimeters or 3.4 in diameter by 4.7 inches in length. So right off the bat, what do we think? Well, it actually feels like it's a well-made lens. Like it has a little bit of weight to it. And I kind of like that. And there's a coldness to the back here because this is metal right here on the barrel, right by the mount. Now this is a used copy, so it will be very well worn in. But, I mean, the aperture ring feels good. The focus ring up front, which I really like. I like having more options here. I turn this off because I always bump it. But that right there as the focus ring, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That feels all right. Now we do get a little bit of drift here whenever we put it all the way out if we're holding it up like this. And the same applies if the camera's hanging down, although to a lesser extent. We have an auto manual switch there. That's nice and clicky. We have a function button, which is nice and clicky. What about the balance? It feels pretty good just by itself. And then when we zoom it out, obviously it gets a little more front heavy. But how does it feel on a camera? Let me grab the Z6 III. Even though I'm doing all these tests on 45 megapixels, mostly the Z8, but I will allow for the Z9 as well, just to be really consistent. I think this particular setup here, the Nikon Z6 III or the Z6 II or the Z6, with this lens that kind of covers a ton of territory, I think this is a really good setup. So I think more people would probably be interested in this setup. So that's what we're using to check the balance. That's pretty good balance. It's not tilting forward like hardly at all. Zoom it out. Now it does, but it's not falling off the fingers. It's pretty compact whenever it's closed down. So I imagine I probably give this top scores for bagability just because it does like so much and it doesn't take up that much space. I want to say also, it's just kind of a good looking lens. I like the way that it looks. You know, it's got almost like a stepping out in diameter, but it doesn't get really crazy. It's just a good looking lens. Not that looks matter. Something that you should keep in mind is whenever this is fully extended, the rear element does disappear into the body. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because I wouldn't recommend taking this off of your camera without collapsing it. That seems pretty obvious, but you might get some dust in there because it gets pretty darn deep. Now, I'm not saying that you're definitely going to get some sand or some crap in there. I'm just saying that because that moves, the odds of that happening do go up, and you don't want internal crap. So just keep that in mind. It's really obvious. Just don't be a doofus and close your lens before you take it off. Now I think it's about time we go and take some test shots. We're doing it a little different this time because we have upwards of 65 mile-an-hour gusts outside, and unless you want to hear me talk to in the microphone, I'm just going to do this as a voiceover style. So let's check out these test shots. First thing we got to do is we got to check our focus speed. So we zip this out to 120 millimeter, pull it all the way out of focus, and I would say that this is a pretty decent performance compared to other lenses. It has moderate speed when totally out of focus. Obviously, it's faster when you focus on something up close, and right here we have a little jitter. Whoa, but it found its spot. We're going to test out red saturation here. Through the viewfinder, it looks pretty good. That's typical for Nikon though. The blues look just slightly more than saturated. We come back over to the John Deere over here, and we're going to check our green and our yellow saturation. And I think both of those look fantastic. If you look at those skies, that's exactly what I like. You don't have to do nothing to it. I generally like to pull down Nikon blues because they're too JPEGy. Take a little peek at this yellow over here. It looks nice and rich. Green looks pretty good. Now we're going to take some shots for our black and white ability test here. I'm going to come in and I start testing a theory that's floating around about this lens. Supposedly, it loses some sharpness at 120 millimeter. I can tell you one thing for sure, it's definitely getting some vignetting when it's zoomed all the way in. But people seem to think this lens is moderately sharp, but it does get a little soft when you zoom all the way in. And right there, I'm taking a picture to see what chromatic aberration control is going to be like. Taking pictures specifically for sharpness on this bark is pretty boring, but, you know, since that rumor is out there, we're going to test it. All right, so here we are in Lightroom. Let's look at our red saturation. It is really good. It has a bit of an orange to it, which is interesting. Don't see that a lot. Maybe it's a warmth characteristic in this lens. We'll see later, I guess, as we progress. But red saturation is really good. Blue saturation is slightly more than natural, and that is apparent. These skies, for me, are absolutely perfect. This lens at 24 millimeter does have some vignetting. Let's see what it takes to correct it. I always add vignetting anyway, but you know. About plus 10 totally gets rid of it. Plus 11 starts to get a little white in the corner. Green and yellow saturation, I think, look totally fine. The green is the most natural of the colors. Yellow seems to be kind of like spot on, I guess. So it's pretty natural too. Take a look at the skies again. I love the way that the blues are on this lens. This may not necessarily be a good quality for most people's blues, but for me, this is the kind of blue I like. I like a very natural looking blue because the sky is often apparent. And a lot of the time with Nikon lenses, you have blues that kind of look like this. And that's just too JPEGy blue for me. And I end up pulling them down to this kind of blue anyway. The yellows are better in my opinion if you just go a half stop or one stop underexposed. That generally is the case. Good detail in that seat. Wow. This is at about 68 millimeters, so we're within that range that people really like this lens. They say it softens up when you get at 120. There's a lot of detail in there. A lot of contrast in this lens, too. It's a very contrasty lens. And this is why it's good to take actual pictures besides just a picture of something yellow, because yellow was looking kind of natural. Green was looking kind of natural. Now I'm starting to think that the yellow, when it works with other colors, it is a little more rich. My opinions change as I go. Let's do the wonderful black and white ability test. You know the rule, all we do is click the black and white button, but I do need to bring this up a little bit. It's a little on the flat side, actually. Yep, I'd say it's not a strong performance in black and white ability. Well, shucks, let's try throwing Gravedigger on it. It's just not the move. I like the way that this lens looks in color. Just not really feeling it. VW Grit and Gravy is the choice on this one. It's just a little too flat, everybody. Oh well, you can't win them all, can you? All right, so I took this at 24. Let's look at the sharpness. Let's test this theory that people have. We're going to have to get in at an unfair 200%. I'd say it's just okay sharp, honestly. And I think it's just okay sharp at 120. It doesn't... Maybe it softens up a little. Okay, so I have decided that I think people are wrong, but they're not wrong. I don't think that it gets noticeably softer, at least in this example, at 120. I think it is simply just okay sharp anyway. Just inherently, it's just okay sharp. But we do have good control of chromatic aberration. On lenses that aren't well corrected for it, we often see some fringing in here, but I don't see any, so that's good. I don't see any in the goofy areas of the shadowy areas. We can sometimes see green in those areas. Looks totally fine to me. Dang it. I really wanted this lens to have really good black and white ability because it's hitting on a lot of cylinders, both in its versatility, which it gets high marks on, its bagability, the fact that it fits in your pocket. Oh man, it would be such a perfect lens if I'm okay with a little bit of softness and the sharpness. Backgrounds don't look too bad, you know? I'm okay with that if it would just have black and white ability. Darn it. And then we did these for the chromatic aberration. I just don't see any. There's another one. So good performance as far as that goes. Lots of contrast, man. You can see all kinds of little variations of tone in here. It just doesn't translate well to black and white. Yeah, it's just okay. All right, and I feel like I've already made up my mind on this whole sharpness theory that is going around. But I did this at 24 millimeter. Oh no, I'm sorry, 50 millimeter. And it looks okay. It's just okay sharp. And then we get in here to the 120 and it's just okay sharp. I think what people are saying, okay, here's my complete theory. This is a 24. I think it's just okay sharp throughout the entire range. I don't think there's a significant loss at 120. I just think that okay sharpness just becomes more apparent because you're zoomed in more. I think that's what people are seeing. But I don't think it's an ugly, unsharp lens. It's just not that dang sharp all the way through the lens. So you guys are right, but you're kind of wrong. It's not because it's at 120. It's just because it is okay sharp. Now we need to take a look at the walk-around images. Just a little side note here, this lens is totally pocketable in sweatpants. Nice. And this is exactly why we take real images, because when everything comes together, lots of contrast, it appears sharper than it is because of the contrast that you have. There's lots of different variations, so you pick up all these things, and when you get in at 100 and 200%, it doesn't look that impressively sharp, but it looks really detailed. This one's probably a little bit better of composition. It's a little straighter. Let's try throwing a little thing on here. Ooh, Black Tar Heroic is the winner. Good backgrounds on this lens, even at f4. Again, the black and white ability is just okay, but I do like this in black and white with Gravedigger thrown on there. In here, again, we have okay sharpness, but lots of richness. It's a very rich looking image. I got another one here. And see, this one was done at 1/250th. This was done at 1/400. I love just underexposing all of these lenses just a little bit. It just makes things look more rich. It pulls out some of that awesome juiciness. And on this one, I went over punchy smooth, which doesn't get used a whole lot as far as my presets go, but I like the way this looks with punchy smooth. And just to test out, the Moody Brown also is pretty good. I like this one as well. I would go punchy smooth and call that a day. All right, we got a little leaf here. Maybe let's give this a little play around. See, you don't have to pick up my presets at zwadephoto.com/digital products. You could totally do something like this yourself. It's just not as wacky as mine. That looks pretty good though. Or you can do something like my preset Instabam, which looks like one of the more trendy kind of edits that we see. That's why it's called Instabam. And then we get out on the town, and this was St. Paddy's Day, so it was absolutely incredibly busy downtown, which is exactly why I didn't actually take my full gear out to do a in-the-field walk-around video. I've taken this picture a bunch of times. It sometimes looks good in black and white. With this lens, it's just okay in black and white. Probably just leave it there. That's just flatter than flat. Pancake flat. But in color, I really like this lens in color. Like this natural color. Like if I go over to just like subtle things, which adds like a lot of contrast, I really like it. I really like it in color. Let's just do a previous on that one. Yeah, I like this lens in color. I really do. We fire off a shot down the street. I love the blues. Love the blues on this lens. They're perfect for what I want out of blues. Whenever I do my adjustments, it gets a little JPEG-y. I'll pull it back a little bit. But if you don't throw on a bunch of contrast, it is like perfect blue. So simple. There's just so much color to be had in here. Those yellows look good. This blue looks good. The red stop sign looks rich. I don't see any like aberration. Like this should be just fringing out of control. It doesn't. It's well corrected for it. And we did kind of the same thing in landscape. Let's hit previous on that. Whoa. Need to pull that down. Very rich looking. Let's try this in black and white. Hit it with a little Gravedigger. It just looks okay. Just okay. This looks like an image that's screaming for pop, lock, and shop it. Yep. I like it. Let's get a little vignette going on here. Boom. All right. I like that. Just hit previous on that. This is a good lens. This is a weird case where I feel like in my final judgment of this lens, I'll end up giving it high marks in overall image quality, even though I don't really like this lens's black and white ability score. But overall, it seems to be performing quite well, and I can see why so many people like this lens. It is quite a good lens. It looks great. This one could probably benefit from the same kind of deal. We'll hit repeat on that. Looks good. I see why people like this lens so much. It looks good and it covers a lot of territory. You can do a lot of stuff with it. Yeah, this is a home run lens, even though it doesn't score perfect in some other areas that I generally prefer, like black and white ability. So what can be said about the Nikkor Z 24-120 f4S? Well, I totally see why my comments are full of people that love this lens and basically nobody that doesn't. In my opinion, it was a really kind of subpar performance in black and white ability, but I can't get around the fact that it is overall creating a really nice image. In color, it's got some punch, it's got some poppiness to it. It kind of stands out. It's just noticeably better than other Nikon Z lenses. I really like the fact that it kind of just fits in your pocket. I like the shape of it. I think it's a nice design. It brings back some of the, ooh, this lens looks good kind of vibe, and I love that. So it looks good physically. The images look good. It's covering a lot of territory. It's a perfect walk-around lens, and I actually had a lot of fun walking around with this lens. Now, unfortunately, I won't be buying it because I have tons of lenses that cover this territory, and at the end of the day, I'm still a prime guy. And I prefer lenses with much better black and white ability. Another mention is I think the sharpness is just okay. It's not bad, it's not great, but throughout the entire range, it's just okay. And that's where I stand on the theory of it being soft at 120. I think it's kind of soft everywhere, but it's not terrible. But besides just a few things, the Nikkor Z 24-120 f4S is an absolute home run. I'm Z Wade, the Z Wade, and Z Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.